This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Are the Bluetooth lights on? Okay, Bruchim Haba, welcome everyone. Tonight we have really an astounding subject, really an amazing topic, a revolutionary approach to the story of Pinchas and Zimri and Cosby. If I could beg your indulgence for one moment, for this year you must have a Chumash, and actually I also must have a Chumash. So it's Kedai, everybody needs a Chumash. It's what? No, you need the end of Balak and you need the beginning of Pinchas. To really get this year, it's worthwhile to have Chumashim. Okay, so actually, what's very interesting is we're going to be featuring a new Sefer today. This is a Sefer I do not believe we've ever featured in the past. Actually, I'm pretty sure that we have never utilized the Sefer in the past because it was not a Sefer that I was familiar with, and I want to thank my friend Rabbi Brachfeld, who actually got me these Svarim and called me many times about this piece. And he was very excited about this piece. So I actually put in a lot of time trying to get this piece down. And it's not a simple piece, but really, if we're able to study it carefully, it's going to open up a whole new vista of understanding of the meaning of Parshas, the episode of Pinchas, and the end of Parshas Balak. Now, tonight's shir comes from a sefer Chein Tov. Chein Tov is 5 volumes. It's written by Rav Tuvia Halevi. Rav Tuvia Halevi is one of the Chachmei Tzfas after the generation of Rav Shlomo Alkabetz. So we're talking about in the glory days, in the golden age of Tzfas. And the Chida writes in the Shem HaGdolim, he was a student of Rav Shlomo Sagis, and he wrote the Sefer Chein Tov. Now, I can't say I was very familiar with the Sefer, but as I mentioned, my friend Rabbi Yossi showed me that Rabbi Aaron Leib Steinman was a very big fan of the Sefer. In fact, he showed me a picture that Rabbi Aaron Leib's Svarim of Chein Tov were like all beat up. Like he really harvard on these Svarim, Chein Tov, and he particularly enjoyed the piece we're going to do tonight. So the way the Chein Tov works is he asks a lot of questions. He starts off by asking 7 questions, and the way he answers those 7 questions is by asking another 8 questions. And we're not going to go through every single question, but we're going to try to hit the main ones, and Be'ezus Hashem, we're going to open up a new understanding of Parshas Pinchas. So let's start. We're going to start in the beginning. God spoke to Moses saying, so presumably God told Moshe to tell who? I guess Klal Yisrael. Because it can't mean Pinchas, because a few psukim later Hashem says, Lochein Emor, go tell Pinchas. Obviously, Leimar in the beginning means tell Klal Yisrael. Well, ask the Chein Tov, if Leimar means tell Klal Yisrael, then it should have said, Lochein Emar Loi, later go tell Pinchas, because Moshe already told Klal Yisrael. Lochein Emar means go speak. That seems like Pinchas heard it. And that all of Klal Yisrael heard it. Why would all of them have to hear it if Moshe already told them, as evidenced by the first Leimar? In other words, Mima Nafshach. Who is the Leimar addressed to? If it's to all of Klal Yisrael, doesn't Lochein Emar include all of Klal Yisrael? If it's Pinchas, Lochein Emar is certainly to Pinchas. So why the 2 Amiros? Next. Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aharon HaKohen. That's how Yaki's line, right? In camp, we're always in camp for Parshas Pinchas. So I went to Camp Monk. It's a Yaki camp, So they always had Ben Aharon HaKohen. That's the Yaki trop. Anyway, that's still in my head. Anyway, so the Torah is being Meyaches Pinchas.
Lamar doesn't mean to tell the next person.
What does it mean?
It's going on the first words.
God spoke to Moshe.
In such words, Lamar.
As follows.
As follows, yes. Doesn't mean to tell somebody.
Okay.
Would say,
so it's assuming that the meaning of Lamar is to say it over, right? There are different perushim in what Lamar means. But the next pasuk gives the lineage and the ancestry of Pinchas. Who's Pinchas? He's Ben Elazar, Ben Aharon HaKohen, which is very interesting because only a few psukim earlier, in the end of Parshas Balak, Vayar Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aharon HaKohen just said who he was. It gave us the whole lineage. It gave us mamish word for word who he was. So why do we need? Well, we forgot the end of Balak, so we have to be miyachis him again. That's another question. Furthermore, maybe you'll say the reason why it has to be miyachis him is because the very first Rashi in the Parsha, and it's the Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Pei Beis, Rashi brings down the Shvatim were Mavaza Pinchas. The Shvatim said about Pinchas that, you see this guy Pinchas, you know who Pinchas is? His father Elazar. Who did Elazar marry? If you look on your sheets on page 4, it says Elazar ben Aaron took for himself from the daughters of Putiel. So Elazar married the daughters of Putiel. Whose daughters of Putiel? He married one of the daughters of Yisroi. So they started to mock Pinchas. You see this Pinchas guy? His grandfather fattened cows for idols, for getchkas. And now he kills a nasi. He has bad yichus, he does bad things. So maybe that's why it's miyachisim. In other words, maybe it's trying to defend Pinchas. It's trying to say, because the Shvatim were mavaza Pinchas. They said he has bad yichus, so Hashem says, no, he has good yichus, he comes from Aaron. But still, imagine if people were mocking someone, hey, you have bad yichus, you come from bad stock. Does it help if on the other side he has good stock? I mean, they still have what to poke fun at. Let's go a little further. Pasuk Yud Gimel. The pasuk says, pasuk Yud Gimel, "V'hoisaloy lazaroi acharav beris kehunas olam." It will be to him and his children after him an everlasting kahuna. Why? Because he took a vengeance for his God. No kidding. We just said that like 3 times in the opening psukim. It says, Pinchas ben Elazar, Heisheves chamasi, bekanoyes kinasi, v'lechises bekinasi. So why do I need to repeat a 3rd time that Pinchas is being rewarded? Tachas asher kinei leiloi. We already said that a number of times. Let us move on a little bit further and analyze the end of Parshas Balak. We go to the end of Parshas Balak, we go to Parak Chav Hey, Pasuk Aleph. Vayeshev Yisrael Bashittim, the Jewish people dwelled in Shittim. Marv Rabbi said there are a lot of problems over here. The Jewish people dwelled in Shittim. Why does it say they dwelled in Shittim? What is the significance about dwelling in Shittim? So there's a very interesting medrash, a very important medrash that you need to know. The medrash tells us that until Klal Yisrael came to Shittim, they never did anything wrong. They were perfect, basically, for 40 years. And then they get to Shittim, and all of a sudden, they commit arayos. Shittim, the medrash says, is a lashon of shtos. Right? Ein adam oisa averim came nichnas boy ruach shtos. Says the medrash, vayachal ha'am liznais. The Medrash says, you ever realize, some communities, people have certain character, other communities, they're better character. What does it depend on? So the Medrash says it all depends on the water. That's why I double filter all the water I drink. I don't want to take any chances. The Medrash says that some water makes very big people very tall. And you ever wonder, all the quarterbacks come from, Pennsylvania, Ohio. Why? Who knows? There's something about the water over there that makes big mention, Not spiritually, obviously, but okay. V'yesh chaloshim, some communities, it makes very small people. Yesh noim, some water makes beautiful people. V'yesh mechayarim, some water makes disgusting people. V'yesh tznuim, some water makes humble people, modest people. V'yesh shtufin bezima, some water makes people steeped in promiscuity. The Mayan of Shittim was a Mayan of Znus. Says the Medrash, this is the Mayan that watered which city? Sodom. In other words, in Sodom they didn't drink mineral water. They didn't drink, what's the name of that water? With the Poland Spring. No, the pH-powered water, essential water, right? No, in Sodom they drank Shittim water because Shittim water was water that produced promiscuity. And ultimately the Medrash says Hashem is going to curse the spring of Shittim. Says the Holy Sefer Chein Tov. Says the Sefer Chein Tov. He says, Davar Oyam V'Naira. In the beginning of the episode it says, Vayeshev Yisrael B'Shittim. It's Kedai to have a Chumash. Then it says, Vayachel ha'am. The people began. So now we give them a disparaging name. First they're Yisrael. Yisrael, that's a chashva name. No, it's really, that's a very nice name. And then all of a sudden they become ha'am. They become the people. Then the pasuk beis, Vatikreno la'am. He called the nation. Vayochal ha'am. And then pasuk gimel, all of a sudden, when they do this big aveira and they do Baal Pa'ar, then they get a promotion, Vayitzamed Yisrael. We all know that in any language, you start off with the noun, you identify someone. David Richter came to the Shiur. He came all the way from Kew Garden Hills. Even though he was very hungry, he still came. But I don't say, he came to the Shiur, he came from Kew Garden Hills. David Richter was very hungry, he came anyway. I first have to use, by the way, it's good for our business to get on the video. But first we use the noun, and then we use the pronoun. So why in this episode, the end of Balak, it starts off by saying Yisrael, it goes to Ha'am, it goes to Ha'am again, then back to Yisrael. You would think Yisrael is the name of Klal Yisrael when they're Bechashivos, so you wouldn't use that name when they're doing an Aveira. Why does it say it uses Yisrael regarding Baal Pa'ar, and then when it comes to it's a little bit incongruous. When does it say Yisrael? In other words, what's the method of the usage of Yisrael and Ha'am over here? Ask the Chein Tov. And then at the end of Dalid, V'yashav charoin af Hashem Yisrael. Goes back and forth, but the intervals that it chooses to use Yisrael seem to be very unpredictable. And another kasha. Take a look in the Psukim. Vayeshev Yisrael bashitim, vayachel ha'am liznois, vatikreno la'am, and he called the people, lezivchei Elohehen, to offer karbanos to their God. So what are they worshiping? Elohehen, idols. Vayochel ha'am, the people ate. Vayishtachavu, and they bow down to what? Le'Elohehen, to their gods. And then all of a sudden, after saying, their God, Vayitzamed Yisrael Baal Pa'ar, now we identify which God? Baal Pa'ar. It's a Pele. It should say, Vatikreno la'am leBaal Pa'ar, Vayochel meishtachavu le'Elohehen, Vayitzamed Yisrael le'Elohehen. Why does it use pronoun, and then all of a sudden, Vayitzamed Yisrael leBaal Pa'ar, asks the Chein Tov. Now, another question. All of a sudden in Pasuk Vav, a guy by the name of Zimri. By the way, what was Zimri's name? Some say his name was what? Shlumiel. Now you know where the name comes from. Yeah? And all of a sudden he came. Well, where did he come? V'hinei, and behold. Like, what is the meaning of this V'hinei? What's the big surprise that he came? Where did he come from? Then we go to a Gemara in Sanhedrin, number 7 on your sheets. Says the Holy Gemara in Sanhedrin, Vayomer Moshe al Shoftei Yisrael. So Moshe is judging the people. He convenes a supreme court, and he is adjudicating what to do with the sinners. And what happened? Halach Shivtai Shel Shimon Eitzel Zimri ben Salu. Shevet Shimon went to Zimri. Amrulai, they said, Nasi ain't done in dinei nefashos va'ata yoshev v'shoisek. It's not right. Moshe's judging us, and you're going to be silent. Ask the Chein Tov, what's the Pella? What's Moshe supposed to do? Imagine someone is being tried by the Sanhedrin, by, Rav Shama Zalman, Rabbi Yashiv, and Rabbi Vadia. And somebody says, what are you doing? You're just letting them judge me? What are you supposed to do? This is the Jewish process. You get the greatest dayanim, they judge the case, and they execute the judgment. What's the taina of Shevet Shimon? You're just going to let Moshe judge us? What's he supposed to do? They served Avodah Zarah. There were Edim and Asra. Moshe's the dayan. You can't get a better dayan. What was their complaint? What did they want out of their nasi? Rabbi said this is the best kasha you heard in the last at least 10 days. Okay? Approximately. Look at the end of Parshas Balak. We all know there was a Magefa. How many people died in the Magefa? 24,000.
Where's the Magefa? It's not mentioned. It just says that.
Good. Yeah. So Sender wants to know, first of all, it never even said there's a Magefa here. It doesn't say there's a Magefa. If you look in Pasuk Ches, it says, Pinchas saw. Now I'm going to tell you a secret. It's not on the sheet, but it's okay. Stam Zoyar HaKadosh. It's Mamish Oyim Menoyer. It's Kedai to make the trip to Olam Hazeh. You hear this? It says Vayar Pinchas. What did Pinchas see? He saw that when Adam Harishon ate from the Eitz Hadas, remember this, Isaac? What did Adam see? He saw the floating mem. Very good, Gavaldik. He saw the floating mem. Adam Harishon saw that when Chava took from the Eitz Hadas, it says Vatikach, Vatera, Vatipakachna. It uses words that begin Vav Taf, Vav Taf, Vav Taf. Vatikach mi periyai. She took from the fruit. Says the Zohar HaKadosh, she took the mem from periyai and she appendaged the mem to Vav Taf and it created Misa. That's the famous Zohar. That whenever, that's why if you see floaters, you need to tell your doctor right away, right? If you see floaters, so Adam Rishon saw a floating mem, the floating mem attached itself to the Vav Taf and created Misa. When Pinchas saw the mice of Zimri and Cosby, he saw the floating mem in the air, and he said, Oy vay, the last time there was a floating mem, there was death. And in fact, the Malach HaMavos was bringing Magefa to the world. So Pinchas is Gematria what? 208. He took the mem, and he attached the mem to 208, and he made it Roimach, Vayikach Roimach biyadai. He took the mem, he attached it to 208, and he made it a spear, and he used the Midas Hadin against the people who are dying in the Magefa. But that's not what today's shir is about. The Pasuk says, Vatei Atzar HaMagefa. In Pasuk Ches, the Magefa stopped. Okay, so the Pasuk is saying the Magefa stopped. Even though the Pasuk never said the Magefa started, but the Pasuk says the Magefa stopped. By the way, the next Pasuk is, how many people died in the Magefa? 24,000. By the way, Al Pi Kabbalah, who else were 24,000? Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. So this is a little addition. What do the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva got to do with the Bnei Shimon that were dying? What's the connection? Maybe we're going to see based on what we learned today. But the next pasuk says, Vayu hamesim b'magefa. Those who died in the Magefa. Why does it have to say b'magefa? The previous pasuk already said b'magefa. The pasuk before said the Magefa stopped. So the next pasuk should say Vayu hamesim arba ve'esrim aleph. Those who died, we know it was the Magefa. The pasuk before already said Magefa. Why repeat Magefa? Furthermore, ask the Chein Tov, the psukim are out of order, Azriel. Why are the psukim out of order? First it should say how many people died in the Magefa, and then it should say the Magefa stopped. Why does it first say the Magefa stopped? And by the way, you know how many people died? 24,000. It's out of order. It should first say 24,000 people died, and then now it stopped. Why the opposite order? Next. Says the Chein Tov. You have to know Gemara and Sanhedrin. Gemara and Sanhedrin says on the pasuk in Tehillim.
Where is this pasuk over here? Because there's a pasuk in Tehillim. It doesn't say here in this pasuk here.
There's a pasuk in Tehillim. Yeah. Oh, there's a pasuk in Tehillim. The pasuk says like this in Tehillim. Vayamoy Pinchas vayifalel. Pinchas stood up. And it doesn't say Vayispalel, Vayifalel. So the Gemara says he made plilois imkainai. He made arguments and discussions and sort of verbal disagreements with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why? It doesn't say, it says the Gemara, he Vayispalel, Vayifalel. He argued with Hashem. And the Malachei Ashares came and they wanted to punch him and push him. So Hashem said, no, don't touch him. He's a Kanoi, the son of a Kanoi. He's a Meshiv Chema, the son of a Meshiv Chema. So the Shvatim started to mock him. They said, you know who his Zayda was? Yisrael. So Hashem said, no, that's why we have to be Meyaches him. Pinchas, ben Elazar, ben Aharon HaKohen. By the way, the Gemara tells us 6 miracles happened when Pinchas killed Zimri. One was Zimri, when he saw Pinchas coming, he should have stopped cold. And then Pinchas can't do anything. You know, what's he supposed to do? You know, you can only kill someone, haboyel aram is kind of talking about, but if he stops, you can't touch him. So he should have withdrew. He was stuck. He couldn't withdraw. It was a nest. That's one miracle. The next miracle, he should have argued with him. He didn't say anything. Number 3, Pinchas, when he hit him, mamish bullseye. B'zachrusai shel Zimri, uvenakvusai shel Cosby. in one fell swoop. Number 4, he didn't slip off the skewer. He stayed like a good shish kebab. Okay? So Pinchas was holding the sword. Otherwise, he could have become tameh. Pinchas is a kohen. Number 5, he couldn't get him out the door. The door rose. Number 6 was he stuck him in front of Hashem and he said as follows, God, do 24,000 people have to die just because of what he did? So what was Pinchas' kasha? Do 24,000 people have to die? Yes, doesn't Pinchas know that that's why people were dying? Doesn't Pinchas know that when Arias is committed, disaster comes to the world? How could Pinchas argue with HaKadosh Baruch Hu? But now we understand why the Malachim wanted to hurt Pinchas. Pinchas is mamish arguing with Hashem. Hashem is making a gzera. He's bringing the death of 24. And Pinchas said, no, it's not right. Should 24,000 people have to die because of this? By the way, another question the Chein brings is, who else do we find, does anybody remember? Who else do we find made a similar argument to Hashem? Hashem, does everyone have to die just because 1 or 2 people sinned? Who?
Avram.
Who? Avram. But who Mamre said the same thing?
Yaina.
Who said, who took items and said, here, Yibanu Shalom, look, does everyone have to die because of this? Yehoshua ben Nun. He took the spoils of Achan. He took the cloak of Achan. He took the golden tongue that Achan stole. And he says, does the Sanhedrin have to go down because of one person's Avera? Do we find that the Malachim wanted to kill Yehoshua? Yeshua might have been right. Yeshua was correct. Hashem, the Gzeira seemed to have been excessive. So why all of a sudden Pinchas' argument, all of a sudden all the Malachim want to kill him? Let's talk about Pinchas' yichus for a moment, and then we're going to offer an approach to chidushim atzumim. Pinchas' yichus was number 1. His father was Elazar. Who is Elazar married to? Mibnois Putiel. What does that mean? So Rashi says in Parsha's Va'era, you have it on your sheet at number 4, Rashi says that Elazar ben Aaron HaKoyen Lakach loy mi benois Putiel loy leisha vateled es Pinchas Eila Roshe Avois Halaviyim Lemishpachaisam. That Elazar ben Aaron took from the daughters of Putiel. What does it mean? Rashi says from the descendants of Yisrael who fattened calves for Avodah Zarah, and Mizara Yosef who he challenged his Yetzer Hara. So Pinchas has pretty good yichus. On his father's side he comes from Aaron. On his mother's side he comes from Yosef, but he also comes from Yisrael. So the Shvatim were mavazim, you come from Yisrael, you come from Yisrael. I mean, ask the Chein Tov. 2 out of 3 is pretty good. I mean, Aaron, Yosef, Yisrael. I mean, it's not so terrible to come from Aaron. The majority of Yichus was pretty strong. What exactly was the taina of Klal Yisrael? And it sounds like, you see what this Puti did? It sounds like they're even utilizing the fact that he came from Yosef as to put him down. Well, how in the world could it be a critique to come from Yosef to put down Pinchas? Mav Rabbi Sai, the Chein Tov, Rav Tuvia Halevi says, Apshat, Mamish Oyem V'Noira. He says as follows. Number 1, the first hakdama you need to know is that Klal Yisrael did 2 averos. The first avero was their mezaneh with the Bnei Smoyav. Look in Chafhei. Vayeshev Yisrael bashitim, vayachel ha'am liznois al Bnei Smoyav.
Why didn't the folk go to war against Moab?
Why didn't what?
Why didn't the Yidden go against...
We weren't allowed to, right? Al tatzar as Moav. Because we're related to them, we're cousins.
But they committed, it caused them tremendous sin.
Yeah, they caused us sin, but Lamais, at the end of the day, King David is still hidden in them, so we couldn't destroy them. Ultimately, once David HaMelech came out, so we were able to destroy Moav. Okay, so Klal Yisrael did znos. What else did they do in Pasuk Beis? Vatikrena la'am lezivchei Eloi hehen. They served what? I'm in the end of Parshas Balak. Parak Chafei Pasuk Beis. Vatikreno la'am lezivchei Eloheihen. Now, they served Avodah Zarah. Could somebody tell me which Avodah Zarah did they serve? L'chayra, the Avodah Zarah of Moav. What's the Avodah Zarah of Moav?
You need to eat something, then to...
1 second, no. But what's the Avodah Zarah of Moav? Close. K'moish. Anybody named Moish here? But it's not Moish. It's K'moish. You see, that's why when you imitate something, you always get something really bad. Imitation is always terrible. The real thing is Moish, but K'moish is not. It's the same thing. There's a guy, he's married to a woman, Razy. But imagine if her name was Razy. It's, so imitation is never a good thing. You have to have authentic, not imitation. The always ruins things. Yeah, that's an old Yankel Miller. Okay, so Klal Yisrael did two Averos. Avera number 1 is Znus. Avera number 2 is Avodah Zarah. Which one did Pinchas take up the cause of? Znus. What's he doing about Avodah Zarah? Nothing. Yeah. Wait a second. Is that appropriate? I have a question for you. If someone is mezaneh, so that's infraction bein adam lachaveroi. How can you be mezaneh? You're ruining someone else's marriage. You're ruining yourself. Znus is a disparagement to Adam. Avodah Zarah is a disparagement to God. If you're going to take up the cause of one of these things, which one should you better take up the cause of? Avodah Zarah, not Znus. How do I know that? Remember the Gemara in Sanhedrin about Pilegesh Begiva? The Gemara says in the times of Pilegesh Begiva, Klal Yisrael were worshipping idols. Which idol? Micha. And the Gemara says that they were worshipping Micha so much that the barbecues that emanated from Pesach Micha mixed with the smoke that came out of the Mishkan. And the Malachim wanted to kill Micha, and Hashem said, don't leave him alone. He's a machnes oreach. Says the Gemara, but when the Klal Yisrael experienced Pilegesh Begiva, and they made a civil war. You know what civil war is? Like in the late 19th century, like New York City today, that's what a civil war is, right? So when Klal Yisrael, they made a civil war against Shevet Binyamin, and what did they do? They killed people because of arayos. Hashem said, I will punish Klal Yisrael severely. They only care about arayos. What about Pesach Micha? It's a bizayon to me that they're standing up against arayos and not against Avodah Zarah. When Pinchas took his sword and was going to kill Klal Yisrael, for what? For arayos. And he was not taking up the cause of Avodah Zarah. That created a tremendous kitrig in Shamayim. The Malachim said, you only care about Bein Adam L'Chaveiro, you don't care about Bein Adam L'Makoim. They wanted to kill Pinchas. Klal Yisrael wanted to kill Pinchas. They said, Pinchas, you're going to bring on God's wrath. You don't have a right to do that. When people are sinning and insulting HaKadosh Baruch Hu, insulting Kavod HaShechina, don't stand up for the Kavod HaBasar V'Dam. So l'chayra, you do need a bezdin for Avodah Zarah, yes. But you also need a bezdin for arayos, except for there is this small carved out exception of habayel aramis kana and paigambai. The arayos was he's living with a guy. So that's not by the way, no, that's not a chiv kares. In other words, by the way, there's a famous piece in Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. What's worse, to live with a nida or to live with a guy? But a nida is a chiv kares. A guy is just a lav. But everybody understands that we can't always judge the severity of something by its punishment. So really, the punishment of nida is worse than a guy. But the repercussions of living with a guy is you're destroying the Jewish people. So that's why there's a special halacha, habayel aramis, kanoim poigambai. Okay, so let's talk about this a little. Very good.
You can't do tshuva on znus, but you can do tshuva on avodah zarah. Okay,
you could do tshuva on avodah zarah. L'chayra, you could do tshuva on anything, right?
You can't do tshuva on znus.
Why not? Why? What?
You destroyed place, or you have a mamzer.
Oh, you mean if you have? You're right. If you have a mamzer, you can't do anything. But somebody stam lived with a guy one time.
You can't do tshuva.
Why can't you can do tshuva?
You destroyed it already.
No, I'm saying somebody lived with a guy one time. You can do tshuva. Ain davar oimer b'fnei tshuva. Okay, now Rabbi Sai. The Gemara says like this: Bilam came to Balak, and he said the Jews, God hates one thing. He hates znus. And if you want to get the Jews to do znus, you know what Jews love? Jews love Chinese food. No, I'm joking. Jews love linen shirts, right? Everyone, I'm looking around, that's what the Gemara says. Jews love linen shirts. Why? Because in Egypt, they wore a lot of linen shirts. Linen it's cool, it's soft, it's refreshing. Okay, don't try it at home. So this is Bilam's Eitzah. We're going to get Klal Yisrael to fall for the cheap linen shirts. We're going to position old women outside of the linen shirt tent, the young women inside, and the old woman's going to say, linen shirts for sale for $500. And the younger one will say, nah, you get a better price inside. And she's going to put out wine, and she's going to put out good food, and the Yid is going to eat and drink, and he's going to get a little comfortable. And then she's going to say, you're a preferred customer, sit down, make yourself at home. You know, like these car dealerships, they say, and with all sincerity, they say, to us, the most important person in the world is our customer. No kidding, right? But and that's like a way of saying, to us, your money is the most important thing in the world. So that's what, and finally the Yid ate and drank, and his taiva overcame him, and he tells her, Hashmi li, give in, and she says, she whips out the Avodah Zarah, not until you bow down to this. And he says, I can't do it, I'm a Jew. She says, who cares? All I want you to do is a little Baal Pa'ar. Just defecate in front of the Avodah Zarah. And the Jew didn't know that this is the way of worshiping it. Because we know that if you bring a sacrifice to any Avodah Zarah, you're Chayv Misa. If you bow down to any Avodah Zarah, you're Chayv Misa. But any Avodah Zarah, that this is the way it is worshipped, you cannot worship it even if it's a disgraceful way. In other words, to throw a rock at Markulis is Avodah Zarah. To defecate in front of Baal Pa'ar is Avodah Zarah, and that's how they got Klal Yisrael to succumb. So, says the Chein Toiv, there were two Averos of Klal Yisrael. Number one was Arayas. Number two is Avodah Zarah. But which one brought which? Klal Yisrael had no interest in serving Avodah Zarah. It was only, they served Avodah Zarah to be able to do the Arayos. So Pinchas had a chap. Pinchas said, I know the Ma'isa Pilegesh Begeva. I know you're not allowed to stand up for Avodah Zarah if there's instead of Arayos. I know you're not allowed to stand up against Arayos in the place of Avodah Zarah. I know you have to stand up for God's honor and not the honor of man. But if the only reason they're worshipping Avodah Zarah is because of the Arayos, if I take care of the Arayos, they won't serve the Avodah Zarah, so I'll nip it in the bud. So Pinchas had a cheshbon l'shem shamayim, even though it wasn't a halachic cheshbon, meaning purely halachically he needed to stand up for the Avodah Zarah, but al pi svara, in order to mekadesh shem shamayim, he figured he's better off wiping out the arayas, and that will take care of the Avodah Zarah. Now, there were different kinds of Jews. The lower Jews, they went straight for Chumash. That's the pasuk. Vayeshev Yisrael b'Shittim. The Jews went to Shittim. Who are the Jews? Klal Yisrael in a very high madrega. But then they began to falter. Vayachel ha'am. The people became chulen. Or vayachel can mean they began. How did they begin? They lowered themselves. It all came, they began through liznois b'nois moyav. Oh, once they started the znus, as the Gemara says, v'tikrenol lezivchei Eloheihen, to sacrifice to their gods. Which God? Straight up Chumash. The real God. Vayoichalam, they ate. Vayishtachavu, they bowed. They didn't do Baal Pa'ar yet, they bowed Eloheihen. And what about the Jews on the high level? Achin vayitzamed Yisrael leBaal Pa'ar. Not only did the riffraff worship Chumash, but the higher Yidden attached themselves to Baal Pa'ar. And who is Hashem more upset at? The lower Yidden who do a big Aveira, or the better Yidden who do a more innocuous Aveira? Vayicharaf Hashem b'Yisrael. Because for a Jew can say, oh, I don't know, I'm a quiet guy, I don't know. No. Shigigas Talmud Oilaz Adain. someone who should know better is held more accountable than someone who doesn't know. So this is a beautiful reading of the pasuk. Klal Yisrael got to Shittim, but then they drank the bad waters. They were the waters that induce arayas, and the Jews began through arayas, and the arayas brought about avodah zarah, which avodah zarah kamosh. But the real problem was not the lower serving Elohehen. The real problem was vayitzama Yisrael lebal pa'or. So Hashem tells Moshe like this. Moshe Rabbeinu, take the Jews and put them opposite the sun. Now, you have to understand, why did Pinchas stand up against Arayas and not Avodah Zarah? So we said because Arayas was the cause of the Avodah Zarah. But there was another reason. Because the Gemara in Sanhedrin says Moshe Rabbeinu was already judging the Avodah Zarah in a Sanhedrin. Now listen to this. Who's Moshe judging exactly? The guys who are worshipping Chumash, so we have Edom, and we have open Eidos that they're worshipping Chumash, and probably some of them were warned, so Moshe could judge them according to the regular process. But a guy who's bowing down to Par, first of all, we have Edom. He may have done it privately. Also, maybe he didn't know that this is the type of way to worship this. What if a guy says, I didn't know you're not allowed to defecate in front of Par. Is he chayiv misa? It's not chayiv misa. He's a shoygeg. And in fact, he wasn't warned. And maybe he could say, I didn't know. When it comes to bowing down, you can't say you didn't know. Everybody knows bowing down to Avodah Zarah is bowing down to Avodah Zarah. But you could say, I didn't know that going to the bathroom is a way of serving an Avodah Zarah.
The same as they get them trucked in to go to the bathroom.
What? Yeah, they said, look, I didn't know that this is Avodah Zarah. So Hashem tells Moshe, if you want to know who worshipped Chumash, you bring them out to the Anani HaKavod. The Anani HaKavod will open up, Rashi says, and the sun will shine on all the guilty ones. Now I have a question. Could Moshe kill these people? Halachically? No, there's no hasra, there's no edus. It's just a supernatural process. But Moshe was killing them. Now listen to this. Klal Yisrael sees what Pinchas did. Now you ready for the Chiddush of the night? There were two magefas. Where? It says it beferish in the pasuk. The first magefa was when Zimri and Cosby were living with each other, people were dropping dead, and that's because many of the Bnei Chein were being mezana with the Bnei Smayav. That magefa, the Torah doesn't say how many people died. That magefa came to an end when Pinchas shechted Zimri and Cosby. Vateyotza magefa, the penultimate pasuk of Balak. The second last pasuk of Balak. Vateyotza magefa, that's magefa number 1. It stopped. When Pinchas killed Zimri, the magefa stopped. What should have happened? Nobody else should have died. All of a sudden, after the first magefa stopped, the Malach HaMavet starts wiping people out in a second wave like nobody's business. Much more people died in the second wave. Why were they dying? You know why? They said, Pinchas, because you stood up for the kavod of Basar V'Dam and not the kavod of Shechina. So they blamed the second wave on Pinchas. We had a kasha. Why does Pasuk Tes have to say B'Magefa? We know they died in Magefa. That's the Pasuk before about Teyatzar Magefa. We asked, shouldn't first it say 24,000 people died in the Magefa and then it stopped? No, there are two different Magefas. Magefa number 1 was because of the Arayas. Pinchas thought it was going to stop when he knocked off Zimri and Cosby. That's when it got started. And all of a sudden, all the Bnei Shimon said, what kind of rabbi is this? He's just causing Magefa. Because now that he killed Zimri and Cosby, more people were dying.
So the 24,000 people would die in which month? Which Magefa?
The second Magefa. And they blamed it on Pinchas. So you know what they said, Pinchas? You know why you care more about Arayas and Avodah Zarah? Because you come from Yisrael. Yisrael worshipped every idol in the world, so you don't care about Avodah Zarah. It's in your genes to serve Avodah Zarah. But you care about Arayas, because Yosef HaTzadik, never succumbed to Arayas. Now we understand exactly why they're pinpointing his yichus. Your yichus is Yisrael, the big oived avodah zara, so you don't care about avodah zara. And your yichus is Yosef, who overcame Arayas, so you care about Arayas. But that's a violation of Kavod HaShekhinah. That's why God is bringing a second Magefa. But that's not why God was bringing a second Magefa. God was bringing a second Magefa because they didn't trust the Das Torah of Pinchas. Now we understand they didn't have Kavod Chachamim, who were the Gilgulim of the 24,000 Bnei Shimon, the Bnei Rabbi Akiva. They were the Loinagu Kavod Zebazeh. They didn't have Kavod to the Chachmei Yisrael. It's the same infraction.
So when Moshe judged them and killed them, that's...
Very good. No, that's a third thing.
Okay.
So if you remember, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, they came running to Zimri, and they said, Moshe's trying us, Moshe's killing us, why don't you do something? So we asked, what do you mean Moshe's judging them in the Sanhedrin? That's not what their taina was. The fact that Moshe was judging them in the Sanhedrin, Moshe is allowed to judge those who bow down to Chumash, but Moshe made a Haira Asha. Moshe wasn't just killing those who bow down to Chumash. Moshe was killing those who bow down to Baal Pa'ar, even those who really didn't know that you're not allowed to serve Baal Pa'ar by defecating. Because Moshe said, if I'm not going to take care of these guys, and I'm only going to take care of those who served Chumash, what's going to happen is everyone's going to say only Chumash is a problem, but Baal Pa'ar, knock your heart out. Go enjoy yourself with Baal Pa'ar.
How many people died in the first Magid?
So in the first Magid, we don't know. We don't know. But this is a Chiddush Ayim Menorah. There were two Magefas. The first Magefa was a Magefa based on the Arayas. The second Magefa, they blamed on Pinchas for standing up to the wrong thing. They said, it's because of your Yichus. You only care about Arayas because of Yosef. You don't care about Avodah Zarah because of Yisrael. Hashem says, no. This man only cares about me because he comes from Aaron HaKohen. Aaron HaKohen was the one who made the Egel. Why did he make the Egel? The Medrash says because Aaron wanted to show them that he crept into their deep subconscious, and Chazal say that at Har Sinai, when God was saying, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, they already had plans on making the Egel. And Aaron had to weed it out of them. And Aaron said, if I make it, God will blame me and he won't destroy the Jewish people. And if I make it, I'll delay until Moshe gets back. So Aaron did the unconventional, even though according to the letter of the law, you can't make it, he did an Avera Lishma to calm down my wrath. So too Pinchas is doing the same thing. It's not that he cares about Arayas more than Avodah Zarah. It's he's thinking, why are the Jews serving Avodah Zarah? They're only serving Avodah Zarah because they wanted to do Arayas. So he figures if he nips Arayas in the bud, then they won't serve Avodah Zarah and he'll also withdraw my wrath. So it's not because he comes from Yosef. It's not because he comes from Yisrael. It's because he's from Aaron HaKohen, who's Heishav es Chamasi, Me'al B'nei Yisrael. And that's Meduyuk in the Pasuk says the Chein Toiv. Look in Yud Gimel. V'hoisoloi ulazarei achara bris kuluhuna asoilam tachas asher kinei leiloi kav. Don't think he's taking the vengeance of man. This is my vengeance. The Arayos is my honor, because since the Arayos is leading to Avodah Zarah, the Arayos is my honor. Marav Rabbi say this is a rather novel take on the episode of Pinchas and Zimri. The two great chidushim are that in fact there were two Magefas, and this is meduyuk in the fact that it repeats Magefa again in both the last two psukim in Parshas Balak. The first Magefa was because of the Znus. The second Magefa was because the Bnei Shimon did not trust the Das Torah of Pinchas, says the Chein Toiv. And that Magefa was worse than the first Magefa. And there were two types of Avodah Zarah. They got there, they were Yisrael. They began by Yochalam Liznois. That led them to Leiloi Hehen, real Avodah Zarah. But that's not what Hashem got upset with. What Hashem got upset with was by Yitzamed Yisrael Lebal Pa'ar, the higher Jew who should have known better to stay away from Avodah Zarah entirely. So Marv Rabbi say, what?
Who was Zimri?
Zimri was a great Nasi, Shlumiel ben Suri Shaddai. And after all, you remember we said many, many times that he lived with this woman, how many biyos? Begematria, Mashiach ben David. We spoke that out from the Spinka a number of times. But at the end of the day, Pinchas risked his life. By the way, why did he risk his life? The Gemara says that if at that moment Zimri would have killed Pinchas, Zimri would have been pater, and if then Pinchas would have killed Zimri, Pinchas would have been chayiv. So he put his life on the line because he understood at the end of the day, it's not about, in this instance, doing what the obvious kavod would be to Hashem, but to think a little deeper and recognize that it was the arayas that was leading to the avodah zarah. He's going to nip it in the bud, and ultimately Hashem was machshiv what Pinchas did. No, it's sort of the students of Rabbi Kiva were a parallel to this Avera, because the sin of the Bnei Shimon was they didn't. In other words, they questioned the value, the judgment of Pinchas. They said, who do you think you are? We think it should be done this way. They questioned. No. It seems like somehow it's a repetition, or it happened again. No.
But Rabbi, if Moshe kills him.
Yeah, Marva Boisai, I wish everyone a great night. Thank you so much for coming. Bracha v'atzlacha. Yeah. Why didn't Moshe kill Zimri? No, because Moshe, okay, good question. Moshe was killing the Oved.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.